Breakfast Live online session. This is being broadcast on Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022. Although, in an interesting twist, it's being pre-recorded because at the moment that you're watching this, I will be backpack hiking in Yellowstone National Park and or the Grand Tetons, and in the area that is being served by our guest here today. So welcome, as usual, to our Broadband Breakfast Live Online. We are here every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Of course, that's 11 Central and 10 Mountain and 9 Pacific, and you can do the math for the rest. We've had some great programs over the last couple weeks. We've been doing our Summer of Broadband, where we've listened to state broadband leaders in Utah and Indiana, and we'll be hearing from more state broadband leaders in the other weeks of August. Last week, July 27th, we had a special Broadband Breakfast Live in-person event in Morgan City, Utah, where we heard from the mayor and the Utah Department of Transportation officials and the folks from Utopia Fiber, and also X-Mission, both of whom, Utopia Fiber and X-Mission, have some role in the project we're going to be discussing today. So I am really, really pleased to welcome our two guests for today's program. We're going to be hearing from Greg Metzger, who is the CEO of Yellowstone Fiber. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we're also going to be hearing from Kimberly McKinley. Kim is the Chief Marketing Officer at Utopia Fiber. And Utopia Fiber, as I just mentioned, has an interesting role to play in Yellowstone Fiber. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. And I don't know if you know this, Drew, but August 3rd is my birthday. So, I mean, we're all celebrating on this August 3rd of Yellowstone Fiber.
Oh my goodness! Happy birthday! When everyone's watching this, it will be Kim's birthday. So give a shout out to Kim for her birthday today. What a great coincidence! I also want to give a special shout out to all of the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast. We're really excited to have, as usual, Utopia Fiber as a sponsor, Broadband.money, Broadband Now, Lightbox, Ookla, Michael Baker International, Google Fiber, Pinpoint Capital Advisors, Powerhouse Management, Positron Access, Bitstream Communications Inc., Samsung, and the California Emerging Technology Fund. We couldn't do our programming without our sponsors, so we are very grateful for each of them. And once again, we will have our normal live programs in all of the subsequent weeks of August, and know that you'll find your way to this special pre-recorded interview today. So Greg, let's just start with Yellowstone Fiber, past, present, and future. Tell us a little bit about your background, Greg, as an entrepreneur, and how you started this nonprofit entity that's serving some of the most beautiful part of our country.
Well, thank you. I've got a technology degree from Western Washington University. I've got an MBA from City University when I worked with Boeing. So I worked at Boeing. I've made deposit bags. I made UPS airborne bags. I came to Montana to build furniture. And then I worked for a private local broadband company and then migrated to Bozeman Fiber. Bozeman Fiber began back in 2011 as a concept to bring broadband to Bozeman and kind of connect us to the world. We're a little bit out in the middle of nowhere if you compare us to everybody else. And it was a small town at that time, probably 20,000 people. And it grew, and the city brought together the county and the school districts, and they created a C4. It was funded with community reinvestment.
Just define that. A C4, you mean a 501c4 entity under the tax code, which is one of various variants of nonprofit organizations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so they did that with 8 banks with CRA funding and built about 23 miles of fiber. So, and that fiber connected all these schools and city and county buildings, and also the business district downtown and a business district we have. It's called the Cannery. So that was where it began. They started in 2016 with the schools and brought on their first commercial account in February 17. And then we started as an open network with 5 providers, and they brought me on in August to help bring more commercial accounts on board. So from that point, we sort of grew. We had just reached profitability in 2021 in the summer, and it was marginal. We weren't, I wasn't going to Monaco on vacation or anything, but at least we were making money, and it was terrific. But during the time of COVID, and to step back a little bit, we had talked with Utopia about trying to work with our city, and because of bonding issues and the growth of Bozeman, there just wasn't funding available for the traditional Utopia model. So during COVID, continued to explore possibilities, recognized that there were literally thousands of failures out there in the broadband market, and did not want to go in that direction. So we had a local company do an industrial development revenue bond. And I talked to the county and they said we could do the same thing. I talked with Utopia. We partnered up. Now, mind you, I was a single employee, $500,000 company with $4 million bank debt. So at that point, working with the county and bringing Utopia in as my primary and only partner, we were able to get a $65 million investor-based loan or bond. So I tell you, most incredible time of my life. I've never worked so hard to get through all the paperwork, but with Utopia's help and support and the team that they use in the bond market, we got our bond. And at that point, as we looked at what we wanted to do, we had switched to a C3 so that we could sell a tax exempt bond. That's a 501c3, which is just a higher standard than a 501c4. Very interesting process to get that done, especially during COVID. And then we got our bond money and changed our name to Yellowstone Fiber just to give a bigger, broader name for the bigger, broader country that we expect to serve. So that's sort of the history. From that point,
let's stop there for a second, Greg, if that's okay. I want to ask a couple questions here because our listeners are deep into the weeds of broadband infrastructure, and they're going to want to know a little bit more about some of these aspects here. So let me just ask, when you said that Bozeman, do you live in Bozeman, by the way, Greg?
I live in the county.
In the county. So Bozeman is what the county seat for this Gallatin County, is that right?
That's correct.
And so you mentioned it was 20,000 in 2011. Is that correct? Are you saying like grown like a weed? I mean, what's going on in Bozeman there?
Oh yeah. Well, it's 2022 and we're at 55,000 plus.
Wow.
And it has just been extraordinary. Our university went from, I don't know what it was in 2011, but we're up to 17,000 students, which is more than doubled in the last 10 years. So wow. We're it's an amazing place. Our airport has direct flights to, I think, 6 cities in the U.S. So pretty unique for Montana.
And what do you attribute this very, very rapid growth in Montana? And you kind of alluded to the problems that caused. What kind of problems? Growth is normally a good thing. What kind of problems did the growth of population in Bozeman cause for you all at Bozeman Fiber?
Well, the biggest problem. So we're a little slice of heaven. It's a beautiful place. We have incredible summers. We have access to the park. We have access to skiing. Hunting and fishing is extraordinary. There's 4 blue ribbon trout streams within 25 minutes. It's an
Mhm.
amazing place. So that combined with COVID and the great escape from some of the cities where people were able to cash out has made us a destination.
Wow.
And so the problems that came with that is that the city and the county both are spending an extraordinary amount of money putting in utilities and services, which is water and sewer primarily. So bonding wise, they don't have any excess money to throw at something like fiber, where there is minimal coverage, and it's just lower on the list. It's tough for the city and the county to make those investments.
No, thanks. You answered that question well, and that all makes sense. So one thing that again our listeners are familiar with is, and let me just kind of break this down, right? There's private companies doing broadband, obviously, right? And there's what we call public companies, publicly traded companies. They're obviously private companies. Big telecommunications providers are public companies, and they're raising money on the stock market and using that for investment. And then there's private companies that are, backed by private equity or other forms of private, non-publicly owned stock, and they're raising money, obviously, for broadband infrastructure. We also talked about municipalities, like pure municipalities, and Utopia Fiber, of course, is an interesting example of 11 municipalities who joined together in an interlocal agreement. So they are, strictly speaking, a public entity, a government entity, and they raise public money. And then there's also, we know, we hear a lot about co-ops, cooperatives, like either rural electric co-ops or rural telephone co-ops, and they're a form of organization that, again, is kind of somewhere in between the public and the private, but we hear a lot about those. What we don't hear about is 501c3s and 501c4s. So just tell us a little bit about your journey, Greg, to creating a nonprofit entity to offer broadband service in the why not a company, right? A for-profit company. Why not a cooperative, right? Why did you end up settling on the nonprofit form of organization, Greg?
Well, in the beginning, I wasn't involved, but the city, the county, and the schools created the C4. And they did that so that they could, at the time, back in 2015, so that they could access CRA money, Community Reinvestment Act monies. And so they needed to be a nonprofit to do that. And so they did that. And their motivation, of course, was to serve those folks, the public servants. Along with that, where the network operated were a lot of other opportunities. So they did the commercial work to help try and get them up to a profitable point where we could make those payments back on those loans. And that's where I came in. The change over to C3 was more understanding that in the bond market, there's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more people interested in non-tax exempt bonds, non-taxable bonds. And so for us, it was and let's be frank, and I think that Kim can correct me, it's about 2 points lower on interest rate if you're a C3. And so for us, we could get more money and we could service more customers. So the C3, and I think, as far as I know, and I'm not probably as knowledgeable as you are, there's no other C3s out there doing this. So we're pretty unique. Yeah. So, it's a great sales feature for my community and for the people in the community. They like knowing we're not tax funded by their dollars. They like knowing we're not in it to make a bunch of money. And we're trying to be good people and good community citizens and make this a special deal.
Absolutely. Well, that's all true, and that's great to know. And I think it's a good marketing opportunity. That is to say, neither for-profit nor public entity, but local and in the community. But we're kind of going past present and future here. But let's talk a little bit with get Kim's perspective. Could you tell us a little bit about the role that Utopia Fiber has played with Yellowstone Fiber and some of your thoughts on these questions we've just talked about nonprofit versus private company versus a public entity that's building infrastructure?
I think it's I think there's all types of ways that people can build infrastructure. I think it depends on your community and where it is politically, where it is with political will. That depends on what path you go. I don't think one is necessarily better than the others. I think that they all have benefits to them. Utopia's role with Yellowstone Fiber is one that we are just their operational partner. So Utopia has been in business for over 20 years now, or 20 years since this concept began, which is crazy to think about it. But we have done everything. I always like to say this. I say this in a lot of my speeches. If it has been done wrong, we probably have done it twice in the past 20 years, right? So we have a lot of experience and we have a lot of knowledge of how to build these networks, and especially open access networks. So we are the operational partner with Idaho Falls, and we have been doing that for over about 3 or 4 years at this point. So we have the knowledge base. And when we did that, we know that we have the knowledge base to bring to Greg and Yellowstone Fiber of some of the challenges that come with building these networks, especially not just building to the commercial areas where he was before, but building into the residential areas. And residential areas have a little bit of feistier people. They're a little bit more hands-on of what they want to see, and they're not used to the open access model. So we are just really providing our expertise to help Yellowstone thrive and grow in that metropolitan area that we call Bozeman Fiber or Bozeman now, right, Greg?
Yeah, metropolitan. That's what we call us.
Yeah. Well, again, most listeners to these broadcasts are familiar with open access networks, but just let's, in the interest of defining our terms and being clear, Kim, what is an open access network, and what are some of the advantages from your perspective to having a truly open network?
Yeah, open access in this in the broadband industry right now there's many terms that people are using of what open access means. But for what we describe open access it is a lit network that you like. So Utopia and Yellowstone Fiber are the infrastructure owners, and they let privates or allow or lease lines for private sector service providers to run along them. One differentiator that I think is very interesting is that we own the drop from into the home. Our DMARC is at the ONT. And some of the other open access networks out there, the DMARC is usually at the curb, and those other private sector service providers do that. No, we do the trenching into the home, and our DMARC to the ISP is inside the home at the ONT from where that is. So that is what we are. That is how we prefer to do open access, but there are a lot of different models out there that are also considered open access as well.
During last week's Broadband Breakfast Live Online show, we talked a bit about this because we were talking about what you all at Utopia Fiber had done in Morgan, Utah. Mm-hmm. And we had one of the internet service providers, X-Mission, which I understand is one of the 6 providers on the Yellowstone Fiber network, and they were singing your praises, Kim. I mean, you gotta pay him more. I mean, he basically talked about how good it was to work with Utopia Fiber because of the quality and the reliability of the network. Could you just speak to that point? Get your take on this side of the equation, Kim, because a lot of critics of open access networks say, look, the problem is that no one wants to do it because they can't control the end-to-end experience that the consumer is going to get. How do you at Utopia Fiber react to that concern that's sometimes raised about open access networks?
I think that is because in the past there hasn't been a partnership between the infrastructure owner and the ISP, and that's where we find it very we're very different in that. We don't go, well, that was the infrastructure that blamed it, or that was the ISP. So we both have our main interest every day is the customer. As I tell my team, we have a customer service team at Utopia Fiber, which everybody sometimes criticizes me about, of saying, well, that's not true open access. You should let the providers do all the work. Well, I like to say is they're my customer as well as the ISP's customer. So if somebody calls into our call center and they've had an issue with an ISP, which usually doesn't happen, and they say, our call center will say, have you talked to your ISP? And if they say, we have, but they haven't solved the problem, I will say, then we'll help you as well. We want to make sure that the customer is the first person that we care about and that we are going to take care of, not who's to blame. And I think that's a very different approach than you see in other open access models. Because in other open access models, it's all of the ISP's problem. No, that is not the case. And we're very transparent at Utopia Fiber. So say we have a fiber cut that happens because somebody runs into a tree. We will post that it's our fiber cut, or we will work with the ISPs if they're having some network issues as well. It's very much a partnership and not the blame game, which I think has been a big differentiator and a big win-win for both the customer and the ISPs.
Well, Utopia Fiber is obviously the largest open access network in the United States. And while gaining momentum over the last 4 or 5 years, open access is still very much an underdog in the United States. But it is more widely practiced in other parts of the world. Did you have any insight into that, Kim, and why it's been slower to catch on in the United States?
I don't know if you know this thing. There's a thing called lobbyist here in the United States, Drew. And there is a lot of money that has been spent to keep the status quo the same. And we are seeing more and more money being spent in Washington and at state levels to keep monopolies and duopolies in place. I think you are starting to see that we are seeing growth in this space around the United States. I'm hearing more and more open access networks pop up, and it makes my heart happy to hear that. But I think when we say open access, I think we need to change it is bringing competition into these marketplaces, because I think the U.S. understands competition. They don't necessarily understand open access. And the way I phrase it to people who don't understand this is saying, well, why wouldn't we do it like we do the airports? The city and the community builds an airport and they allow private companies to run out of that airport, like Delta, United, Southwest. Why wouldn't we treat broadband the same way? And when you simplify it in that aspect, you see people go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why are we treating it like this? Right. So it's just explaining to the US and getting through some of these, the money that is being thrown to keep status quo the same. But I think we're going to grow. I think we're a little slow on the uptake, but we're going to get there. I think it's a different mentality than European and like South Africa has a lot of open access networks as well. It's just a different mentality.
Greg, let's go back to your story and tell us a little bit about yourself. You did mention some of the businesses you started, but what led you to say, Bozeman and Yellowstone needs a broadband network, a fiber network, and it should be an open access network, and this is how I'm going to make it happen. Just talk a little bit more about how you got involved in the project as it was rolling forth.
Well, I started with Bozeman Fiber when they were fledgling. They were already an open network at that time. For me personally, it is challenging to run a nonprofit. I am a conservative American who likes to earn money and build on my success. But the model was correct to get the funding to get this done. As I'm sure most of the audience knows, it is extremely expensive to do broadband, as far as putting fiber in the ground and putting in a futuristic system that will last, tens, maybe 20, 50 years at least. And for me, as a legacy type of thing, from my own personal perspective, doing an open network, putting in this future-proof, if you will, network is kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of doing a good thing at the end of my career. And I love the fact that, number one, nobody else has done it. Number two, we're the best in the nation, in my opinion. Number three, we're associated with the best company out there doing this kind of work, which is Utopia. And the community is absolutely head over heels about it, almost without exception. I do have some legacy providers that are not my friends. However, it'll be a competitive marketplace. So, and the consumer is going to benefit.
So where does Yellowstone Fiber stand at this moment when we're broadcasting August 3rd? What's the state of subscription if you're a business, if you're a resident, and what's going to happen very soon over the next few weeks, Greg?
Well, currently on our existing older, if you will, Bozeman Fiber network, which is a GPON network, we have about 260 customers outside of our anchor tenants, which there's another 26 connections there. So from that, we're in the process of adding it hopefully at the end of August. And if you were going to bet money, probably the first week of September, which makes Kim smile, because I'm kind of demanding about the August 29th date, and I'm working as hard as I can to make that happen. But at that point, we should add approximately 2,000 available subscribers with our first area. The next month, we'll add another 2,000, and then hopefully by November, December, we'll add another 4,000. So sort of on the residential side, from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 4 months as far as adding people on. We've been at it for 6 months with our construction and design.
Are these 4,000 subscribers people who have already signed up and said, I want service on Yellowstone Fiber?
No, not at all. We've probably got about 1,200 people that have, and Kim's waving, that want service. But that doesn't count all the people that sort of take my card as I walk down the street. So
go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say that I think it's the people who can get service. It's the addresses that will be passed is the number. Okay. We're assuming, as Greg says, that there's going to be an incredible uptake when they are able to sign up, or all of them are able to sign up. We do have some areas that are able to sign up for their first installs, which is going to be in September. Greg, we like to put some buffer in. So I'm a big believer that you under promise and over deliver on these things. So, but yeah, no, it's, I think we're moving at a rapid rate. And I think one of the things that we really are proud of is, if you look at it, is that we closed the financing on this deal in January, and you're going to see first customers lit it up in less than a year. And one of the more harsh climates in the U.S. of Bozeman, Montana, because I've been up there when it's been -8 outside. I mean, we are being creative and we are being agile in order to get some of this conduit in the ground and moving as fast as we can as we approach probably a brutal winter up there in Bozeman.
So what's the extent of the network going to be, Greg and Kim, like in terms of the number of homes passed, and let's do this both in terms of the Bozeman area and then the larger greater Bozeman area that you aim to serve, as I understand it, Greg.
Well, I think if you took a snapshot of January when we put together our plan, there were 23,000 homes that we could pass. That we will pass. And then once we expand into the county, there is another, 35,000 homes probably in our county, but that's spread over a huge area. That's over probably 800 square miles. So to get to some of those homes, it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take some help with funding.
Well, this is a great introduction to kind of the future part of our discussion, right? And very, very recently, I think on the 21st of July, you had a press conference there in Bozeman. You talked about the fact that you are going to be seeking broadband equity access and deployment grant program funding. This is the large portion of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It has $42.5 billion in federal funds for last mile deployments. At least $100 million is going to each state, whether it's the smallest state of Delaware or Rhode Island or a large state like Wyoming. Tell us a little bit about your thinking, your announcement, Greg, and what you're expecting to get as you ponder the BEAD program that's part of IIJA.
Yeah, our goal is to provide our product, which is up to 10 gig to every home, to every house in the county, every residence in the county, or business, if you will. And that includes farms and ranches. So having said that, how much do I expect to get? I need about another $50 million to do what I'd like to do. However, we'll make application and go through the process with everyone else. Hopefully, as an open network, we will have an offering that the people who distribute the money will think is appropriate and offers competition versus offering that money to someone who has a single point of contact for entry into the home. So, it's a changing world, as Kim said. I think probably 5 years ago, this would be a pretty daunting task. I think today that the world is a lot more open and understanding, and I think government has a better idea of what we can offer. I need to get out there and get my network up so that as the funding becomes available, I have something that's proven, and that burden falls on me to get that done as quickly as possible.
Have you interacted much with the officials in Montana, the state broadband officials? What kind of insight do you have at this moment here in early August as to what the process will look like for getting access to that Montana funding?
Well, depending on how it's dispersed federally, Montana has fairly quickly, I understand, compared to many states. We're doing the ARPA funding now, and we're in the middle of waiting for the assessment of the ARPA money out into the public. And so we've applied initially for it's $10 million with the matching $3 million to do the northern part of our county, north of Bozeman. And so I believe that they'll probably follow that ARPA plan pretty closely. They've spent a lot of money and time and effort developing that plan and the way they analyze. So that will be our first step to see if we can get that money. And if we do get it, again, to get that deployed as quickly as possible to make the BEAD money more accessible to us, as in we're a proven entity, we're doing things that nobody else has done. We can deliver 10 gig to a home, and we will.
Mm-hmm. Kim, what are your thoughts on the BEAD application process for an entity like Yellowstone Fiber here?
I think it's going to be an interesting time to see what happens. I think we have to wait to see what what the rules are going to be. I think we're still waiting to see if the NTIA simplifies the process. It's pretty complicated at this point. But I mean, the ultimate goal when we did the $65 million of funding almost a little less than a year ago was that the purpose of building this was not just to build to Bozeman, but really to build out throughout Gallatin County. And we are, as Greg said, we're going to use every funding resource and every grant and loan and whatever is out there to make this happen. And I think with the creativity and the team that we have on board, that we'll get there. I think that we have the best team in the business on all fronts to make this happen. And we are excited to continue to work with Greg and the state of Montana to make sure we do fulfill the original goal that we started how many years ago? A couple of years ago when we started talking, Greg?
Yep, about 2.5 years ago.
So, Kim, could you just repeat what you said about the numbers? Because, in this event, we referenced the former Bozeman Fiber 2015, and with the city of Bozeman, Gallatin County, and the school district, you had 8 bank funding for a CRA designated loan. And my understanding that was a $4 million loan for a fiber ring. You've mentioned a $65 million amount. What is that additional $65 million amount?
The $65 million amount was the amount that Greg referenced earlier in the show. That's how much that Yellowstone Fiber bonded for in January to build out the first phase of this project. We knew when we did that bonding that it would not cover the entire county. This was just for us to get the network started, as Greg said, and to prove that the success that we can show, and then we would pursue additional funding. And then, since then, as we all know, since January, we're seeing supply chain constraints, we're seeing price hikes. So we're looking at this and we're being very creative of how do we approach it and looking at the future and making sure that we can deliver on all of our promises. As you know, Drew, Utopia has had its history of, and now since 2009, we have been very successful. So we take it to heart that we are absolutely going to deliver on all the promises that we talked about with Greg and his team back in the day.
What was the target amount of homes passed or customers, however you measure it, for that would be served from that 65 million, either now or adjusted based on inflation and other factors? What's the kind of universe we're looking at being served with that amount of funding?
I'm not sure. I think Greg can answer that question a little bit better than I can, because I don't have the numbers at the top of my head right now.
Yeah, to service my obligation to the investors, I need 9,000 homes, which we feel is, nothing is perfect in this world, but I believe we'll reach that without problem. I think that we'll end up serving closer to 15,000 homes than to 9,000. Our community continues to expand, and as they expand, it's much easier for us to afford to expand and put conduit in the ground when there's open trenches and so on and so forth, reducing the cost dramatically. So I think if we're not at 15,000 homes in December of 2024, you should get me on the show, chide me, and we'll talk about why I didn't get there. But I believe I'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned two other things a little earlier, Greg, that I wanted to come back to. They may be technical points, but again, our audience does. In our discussion last week in Morgan, Utah, with the officials there and with Roger Timmerman of Utopia Fiber, there was some degree of discussion about GPON, or gigabit passive optic network, versus the active Ethernet networks that Utopia Fiber builds toward. But I think, Greg, if I heard you right, you said something about a passive optical network that is partially built. Are you continuing to do that, or are you building an active network the way I believe Utopia Fiber does in most of the places it's operating?
Yes, no, we're certainly building the Ethernet network, single fiber to every home, and we'll phase out our GPON network hopefully over the next 6 months. So bring all those customers onto the active Ethernet. That's in more simple terms, from my perspective, that's the only way that I can sit here and say, as much as you can make anything future-proof today, you've got to be active Ethernet to be in that space. And I think we will be, and that's what we're planning for.
Kim, do you want to add anything on that point? Now.
It's that mute button I can't hit. When your mouse isn't. I think that as you see this active GPON discussion being heard around the country right now, which is the best technology, at Utopia Fiber and all of our associated projects at this point, we are a fully active network, just because of the scalability and the future proofness that we can offer 10 gig to the home, but in a few years, can we offer it? We could offer 100 gig to the home if we really wanted to, if there was any applications out there, right, Drew? Right. So we truly believe that the active platform, but you never know what the future holds. We can never say never, but right. But we are working diligently and working with Greg's team to make sure that the customers on the GPON network today will have an easy transition over to the active network when we make that happen in the next few months.
Well, let's transition. This may be the last question that I've got, unless there are other things that Greg or Kim would like to throw in the discussion. That we hear a lot of discussion about what is served for broadband right now, right? And there is, of course, a federal standard currently of 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up, which kind of almost universally regarded as inadequate as a definition for broadband or for being underserved in broadband. There's a higher standard that's come into a lot of discussion over the last 2 years, the 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits per second up. And the FCC has made moves to kind of move towards this standard. In some ways, it's a kind of a de facto higher standard, because that is what the NTIA, the National Telecommunications Information Administration, has decreed to be underserved. Okay, so if you don't have 100 by 20, you are considered underserved, right? And those may not be adequate, even those, right? I mean, what we've been talking about here, what Greg and you have been talking about, 10 gigabits down, which is 10,000 gigabits per second down, and 10 gig up, which is 10,000 per second up, which is obviously way beyond 3, right? Way beyond 10. But Greg, what kind of markets are in Gallatin County are what kind of services available right now? Do they have 25 by 3? Do they have 100 by 20? They don't have 1,000 by 1,000 or 10,000 by 10,000. What you're offering, right? So they're clearly underserved in that department. What do you kind of run into as you sort of look at the other alternatives, if any, that people in your market have right now?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways to describe what's in our marketplace. The standard package that's sort of out there is the 65 by 5. And then there's also a package you can buy for a 400 by, I think it's 20. Neither one of those actually provide those numbers because they're all shared. And people end up with, when you buy 400, you get 40, maybe. And that's not to say that they don't get full service at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It does happen. So, and then once you get into the county, there are folks that have that are getting some DSL. They're on 7 by 2, and I've gotten letters from a couple people that have 2 legacy services, so they get enough bandwidth so the kids can do their homework, and one of the parents can work from home. So there's a dramatic need for it. And then some of the far-reaching, the farms up against the foothills and out in the, a couple miles off the road, they don't have anything other than the DSL type of product. So, I don't know that we're going to change somebody's life, but we're going to offer information that they've never been able to access from their home or ranch or business. So I think what we're doing is going to be pretty incredible.
When you look at maps, though, you're not running into territories, census houses that are listed as covered and hence ineligible for IIJ funding. Is that right, Greg?
That's correct. We're not. We're running to all underserved or non-served customers.
Right. Well,
that's outside of the city. Inside of the city, we are running to everyone.
And I think the important part of this conversation is, and what Greg kind of alluded to is, like, and I will maybe disagree with you, is that a lot of these people don't even understand this kind of connectivity and what they can do with it, because we're used to only doing as much as we can with the connectivity we have. If we give people like unlimited connectivity, they tend to use it and go above and beyond and like try to explore things that they can never do before. So it's very interesting. At the Utopia Network, and we're about to announce our newest survey, a customer survey, but last year we did one and we asked, has this connectivity changed your life? And over 75% said that it does. And we are seeing, when people have elected down here in Utah the choice of 250, 1 gig, or 10 gig, that over more than half of the new customers are choosing 1 gig. So when people have the access to robust connectivity, they are choosing it. And I think, and I said this the other day, this is the only industry that we are letting the industry dictate what we need versus the consumer dictating the speeds that we need. And I think we have to be a disruptor in that and let the consumer dictate what they need, what kind of connectivity and speeds they need for their home and their businesses.
Well, that was extremely well said, Kim. I can't think of a better way to put how better broadband can lead to better lives, and does. And people are saying in your polls, and I look forward to seeing that when you come out with that. We're kind of rounding the hour here. All of our watchers who are watching us today on August, this pre-recorded program. But let's give each of you a chance to sort of say any final thoughts about the future of Yellowstone fiber, as you see it, and the state of broadband in rural parts of our country. Great, Metzger, go ahead, and we'll do last opportunity to give some last comments here.
Yeah, just as a note to add on to what Kim said, the local university, Montana State, is doing a lot of work with the rural ranchers and farmers to use broadband to improve their productivity so that hopefully we can continue to feed the world. So, and we hope to be a big part of that. Yellowstone Fiber, we're just proud to be doing what we're doing. We're excited to be partnered with Utopia. They're incredible people. And I would tell you it would not be possible. And I would, my standard statement is only in America can a single guy with a $500 million or $500,000 company grab a great partner, get a $65 million bond, and build out a city. And it's an incredible thing. We're lucky, we're blessed, and we're going to make it happen. It's going to be fabulous.
It's inspiring. Thank you for being with us for this hour, Greg. Kim, any additional closing thoughts you've got?
I can't wait to see what the year holds. And, since this is my birthday when this records, I think that it is going to be an interesting year, not only for Yellowstone Fiber, but for the country as a whole of what we see. We are seeing a lot of money being poured into these states and federally, and let's see how creative we can get and see what happens. It's time for us to change the ecosystem of broadband, or the whole what we've seen over the past 20 years hasn't worked. So I'm excited to see all the disruptors who are coming into this space to change a very legacy system. So I'm just excited, Drew, just excited.
Well, thank you for spending this hour with us. For our viewers, we'll be back next week on August 10th, 2022 with a new program in our Summer of Broadband series. On behalf of Greg Metzger of Yellowstone Fiber and Kim McKinley of Utopia Fiber, I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.